I would think that it would be more in a hybrid type manner where, I can do 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. So to me, I see that the technology probably is going to continue to grow and stay the same, or trend towards what, going up, because I don't think that they are going to be able to get the right people in their seats if they are forcing people to be in an office 100%.
Welcome to Her Resources, the podcast where we explore all things human resources through the lens of leadership, equity, and empowerment.
We're kicking off something really special. We partnered with the HerPM, a community of powerhouse women in project management, for a 6-part series that brings together two dynamic worlds, project management and human capital management.
Over the next 6 months, we'll be diving into topics that matter the most: how to lead complex projects, manage change, and drive strategic initiatives that actually make an impact.
Whether you're an HR leader, a project manager, or just someone trying to figure it all out, we've got something for you.
Each month, we'll share real-world stories and leave you with practical insights you can apply right away.
And we're so excited about this collaboration, and we can't wait to take this journey with you all at Her Resources and HerPM and everyone out there watching.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another special episode of the Her Resources podcast. We're thrilled to be back this month, continuing our partnership with HerPM, a firm dedicated to women executives and business leaders who face the challenges of working independently or within primarily male-dominated organizations. If it's a project, HerPM can lead and execute it flawlessly, and they do it all for Her, a community dedicated to empowering women in project management. We are bringing you a special 6-episode series where we dive deep into the intersection of project management and human capital management. Each month, we are exploring critical topics that impact how organizations plan, implement, and optimize their workforce strategies, from navigating complex projects to leveraging technology and driving organizational change. Whether you're an HR leader, a project manager, or someone passionate about building better workplaces, this series is for you. Welcome back to the studio. I'm so glad to see you, Cyndi and Tai.
Hello.
Hello, ladies. It's always wonderful to be here with you all.
Oh, it's always
much
wonderful to
fun.
see you. Oh, I love seeing you guys. It's always so much fun to talk about these things.
Yeah.
It's funny because I literally talk about the stuff as I know you two do as well, all day, every day, and yet I never get tired of it.
Yeah, it's just in my DNA, and I know, Tai,
Right?
that's the same for you, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It
It
is so
never gets
true.
old.
No, it never gets old. Well, I guess that's the beauty of change and really human capital, because humans are constantly evolving, which means the business is constantly evolving, which means we need lots of change in project leadership. So, well, this
Yeah.
month we're going to be talking about HR and technology transforming the workplace. And just to set the stage a little bit, I want to talk about how technology has significantly transformed human resource functions, really with the goal of enhancing efficiency, decision making, and employee engagement. And I remember back in the olden days when paper everything.
Yeah.
That's how we did it all, right? And
Paper
in
and
some cases,
Post-its.
paper and Post-it. And back then too, we didn't always have those robust HR systems either, and so you were using Excel spreadsheets and Access databases, right, to do
Oh my
to do what
gosh,
you needed to
Access
do.
databases. That's
Right?
crazy.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Access
It's so
Box
funny.
Pro. Have you all ever used
Box
a
Pro.
Box Pro?
Oh my God, I
Yes,
haven't done that
yes,
one
yes.
ever.
I know. Well, and I say Excel, but I started on Lotus Notes, and I had a hard time transitioning, if I'm going to be honest.
That change.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
I loved my Lotus Notes spreadsheet. So, no, it's great. But, honestly, there's a lot of focus and just some key statistics that kind of illustrate the transformation. So, artificial intelligence, for example, adoption in HR, a recent study revealed that 81% of HR departments have integrated AI technologies to streamline processes and improve efficiencies. That was in the New York Post recently. Also in the New York Post, they talked about 77% of HR professionals consider AI training essential, emphasizing the growing importance of AI proficiency in the HR field. It's really good to hear that HR is embracing this because it's so important for them to do that. Also, AI is aiding small and medium-sized businesses by automating administrative tasks. I know we joke about
Yes.
that all the time, that AI is the best admin assistant we've ever had, just because, you don't always have access to all those resources, so it's nice to be able to do that.
Mm.
Also in the integration of AI in recruitment processes, it's led to faster hiring cycles. We're seeing a lot in employee training and development as well. The World Economic Forum reports that 44% of workers' skills could be disrupted by AI within 5 years, which just highlights the continuous need for learning and upskilling.
Yeah.
Performance management, that's another one. I mean, think about how many times we roll our eyes to doing performance management because it just seemed like, one, it just seemed like, was it always a good use of time? And did you really get a whole lot out of it? And I think AI is actually transforming performance management, and the technology is transforming performance management because now you have the ability to really kind of look at things throughout the entire course of the year instead of trying to
Mhm.
remember at the end of the year what I did and have my manager trying
Right.
to, grade me on what I could remember or what they could remember. But there are some challenges and considerations. So, despite technological advancements, only 9% of HR professionals complete their daily to do list, with 42% working off hours and 28% overwhelmed, which means that there's still too many workload challenges, right? And then 30% of HR professionals feel mentally drained, and 34% are changing careers. And I have to think that right now, with everything that's going on across the globe right now and just across the country, from it hasn't slowed down since COVID, right? I mean, there has just been a
Right.
constant change that has been happening that has really, I think, been taxing on HR professionals. So, but let's jump in a little bit on this. Now, I'd love to get your thoughts, Ty, on really kind of like, one, why is this topic important to you for sure as we're thinking about digital transformation, particularly in the world of human resources?
Yeah, I think, Linda, it's very important for me because for me, I came in like at the cusp of everything kind of changing. I graduated from high school in the year 2000. So I've kind of seen things evolve,
Yeah.
from my childhood all the way to now. We started off with, I know how to use a rotary phone and things like
Right.
that. So I've actually seen the
What is that?
evolution of
I know.
technology.
Right.
I
I
know
miss
what to
those
do with
old
a
codes.
rotary
That's
phone.
right. I used
What?
to like waiting for it to roll back around. Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
it's so much fun. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So for me, it has been important because I've actually witnessed the evolution, and then going in, like I said, in our last episode, my very first implementation being their first implementation of a
Yeah.
time and attendance system. People were manually clocking in and out. They were, actually manually doing the payroll, and that
Mhm.
was so inefficient. People weren't being paid correctly. They would have to go back and do retro pay, which meant that the city was probably losing money and things like that. So for me, seeing this switch or this change in technology, even with the machine learning that we call AI now, because I can take it
Mhm.
back that it was
That's
called
right.
machine
That's
learning.
right.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Everybody thinks
Yeah.
AI is new, but it's
It's
not. It's
not.
been around a long time. That's it.
Yeah. So I think, it's just the watching the evolution and being able to actually participate in the evolution, and the changes as they're happening as well.
I think that
The
makes
one
a lot of
thing,
sense. Go ahead, Cyndi.
um,
Yeah.
sorry, one thing I would add to that too is, Linda, remember last year when you and I first started doing the Her Resources podcast, and we were like, AI, it's
Mhm.
huge. We don't really
Yeah.
understand it. I feel like we're understanding it more and more. But one of the things that we had determined was and heard was that HR was adopting it really quickly, and
Right.
actually AI wasn't really keeping up with what HR
That's
needed it to
very
do.
true.
And I
Yes.
feel like AI has gotten much better because, I don't know if you guys remember back in the day where you'd get a new laptop and 18 to 24 months, they kind of, okay, now the next version is coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, technology is the new version of anything is coming up in
Oh,
5 months or so, right? So
constantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
AI is
Yeah.
the same. AI is, the trajectory of it is very quick. So I
Very
think,
true.
it's getting much more, it's much more caught up with what people need because we're all feeding
Mhm.
it too. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to take it kind of full circle on where you and I started with that, Linda.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good point. And even when you think about how HR technology is continuing to evolve and advance as well, it's moving very much more quickly than it used to. Because,
Mhm.
I even think about taking it back a little bit further when I first started doing payroll. It was, you had your gross to net and it was taxes, and that was it. That's what came out of the paycheck. That was before really you started seeing the benefits, and employee deductions around that. And I remember when they first started doing 401k plans, you only had a couple of deductions and we did it all on manual, spreadsheets. And that's how we reported all of that. When you think about how complex payroll is today
Oh,
and all of the
yeah.
rules and regulations and collective
Depending where
bargaining
you
and
are and
depending upon where you are, the
right.
policies related to that, and then you think about all of the regulations that human resources has to keep up on around changing employment laws and what's happening, just in their company, but sometimes it's not just their company. You've also gotta be in touch with state and local
That's
and
right.
Yep.
municipal laws, right? So there's a lot that has to really fall in place with all of that. And it'd be impossible to expect people to just know all of that, which is, I think, an important role of HR technology as well, right?
That's where
Definitely.
AI can support us, right, Ty?
Yes, definitely. I think that is AI is I think with everything, being on the bleeding edge of technology, I'm still, I'm a little leery about it. Like I don't try to jump
Absolutely.
into technology like that. Like I go and I do my research first.
Yes.
Mhm.
But definitely I do believe that AI is able to support the role of HR so much better and make things more efficient. And then also, like you mentioned a lot of statistics, Linda, about people being burned out. That
Yeah.
is a constant fear and worry on any team, in any business unit. So
Yeah.
if AI can help to alleviate that, and help to bring that work-life balance as much as possible,
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful thing.
I think so
Absolutely.
too. Well, and we have, we had Ebony who came on and talked a little bit about this on an episode focused on AI. And I think what I like in what you just said there, Ty, is you didn't say AI can come in and fill all of those positions and fill those roles. What you said
Right.
was AI can help release the burden for those people who are trying to do more with less and really need the help. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember is that that is the role of technology. It is not to replace the human element. It is really to enhance and support the human side of it, right?
There'll
So,
always be a need for human oversight,
oh my
especially in
goodness,
human
yeah.
resources. My
Trust
goodness.
but verify,
It's
right?
human resources.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, human resources, exactly. No, it's so
absolutely.
true. Well,
Yes.
and I was just recently kind of to your point, both of your points, Cindy, yours on the technology not keeping up, and Ty, your point on kind of being a little bit like, let's see what's happening. I was recently at an IT forum where they were talking about AI, and that's the big buzz, right? That's everything that. But what they were discussing, and I kind of think this fits in a little bit too, to SaaS technology. You have
Um,
those technologies that were SaaS platforms that were built as, software as a service platforms. Then you have those technologies that were mainframe technology that then kind of we did the lift and shift to the cloud was the first move. And
right.
then now they're converting them into more SaaS type software, but their infrastructure isn't built in the same framework as SaaS versus that mainframe, right? And it's the same thing with AI. Everybody's kind of like, it's just going to sound to me in my non-technical jargon. They're kind of slapping AI into everything, and that doesn't mean it works,
Right.
or that
Yeah.
they have the right foundation, right? What are you seeing, Ty, in your, as you're working with organizations around these things?
So I think I feel the same way that they are trying to slap the technology in and not really integrate it in.
Mm.
So I think like going back to Cindy's point, like human, like the human foundation has to be there. And again, I think with the last episode, we talked about like that buy-in. You still have to have that buy-in and have
Absolutely.
people understand the change, because these things are scary.
Yeah.
You have to realize that people do watch the news. They think that AI is going to replace them, and they don't fully understand that, this is really a tool in our tool belt that we can pull out, that we can use. So I think, like I said, it's just the fact that they are not really reaching out and talking to their employee base, and that's important. We have
Yes.
to, include them.
Absolutely.
I was just having that conversation last night. I went to dinner with a couple of colleagues, and at their company, they were saying, there's a lot of pushback about digital transformation. And they were asking, are there any things that we could do to kind of gain a bit more buy-in? Because
Yeah.
leadership is saying, we got to get this thing done.
Right.
As in any kind of industry right now, there's a lot of mergers, there's a lot of acquisitions. So it's like, this is the way we do things. This is the way we do things. No, not even to mention culturally, right? There's differences and things, but technology wise. So what can we do to help with the speed of implementation, or, figuring out what our digital transformation needs to look like? And one of the first things I said was go out and talk to the people who are actually doing the jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. Well, and Tai, in your experience, like what HR functions have been most impacted by technology? You've been doing this for quite a number of years and working with, especially with these large ERPs. What are you seeing? Like, what are the functions that HR is embracing the technology for?
Good question.
So I definitely love the self-service piece. I love the fact that HR is embracing that, so that I can go and I can pull up my paycheck stub, I can pull up my benefit statement, I can go and I can attest to the fact that all of my hours are correct on my time card. I can sign off on my time card, so I know that, my shift differential is correct. I know that my overtime is correct. I just think that's such a powerful tool for employees to be able to say, to have that knowledge in their hand and not have to wonder, is my paycheck going to be short? Is my shift differential is going to be correct? Because people, no matter what we say, when it comes down to our public servants, especially our police and fire, they
Yeah.
depend on that overtime. They depend on that shift differential. They have children in college and things like that. Like, I've seen it all. I've heard all of the stories. So for them to have that knowledge and have that, be empowered with that knowledge, it's a beautiful thing when it comes to those self-service tools.
That's
No,
their
I like that.
fingertips. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they can talk to their spouse. So,
Yes.
if my husband was looking at his pay last night because he got a pay increase, and he just was able to pull it up on his phone to be
Yeah.
able to say, oh yeah, it went through. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
And how did it impact my paycheck? And how does,
that's
do
right.
I need to adjust my deductions going forward?
Right.
Now
Yeah.
the employee has the power in their hands to really
That's
kind of
right.
take a look at those things, which is so important because I do remember, hating when tax season came around because you knew that employees were going to call you 600 times for that lost W-2. So,
And why wouldn't they? Right?
right,
Works for-
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now they can literally just pull it up, or even better, they can download it right into tax
Right.
software.
Yeah.
Those tools are available as well. Hi, what are you seeing as far as like how we're watching HR utilize the technology from like onboarding and recruitment, and what are some recommendations that you would give organizations as they're thinking about improving their technology around doing those types of functions?
And can I add one thing to that too? Sorry to jump in, but we
But
hear
no
a lot.
pressure, Ty. Let's pile on the questions
We're
for
just
you.
gonna like pile on. 'Cause when it comes to recruiting specifically, I know that people are a little worried that with AI, it's looking at keywords, and people are not being
Yes.
considered for positions that they feel that they should. So
Yeah.
just to kind of add a little there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Cyndi, that's exactly what I was going to say. Working on like optimizing your your LinkedIn, working on optimizing your resume so that if a company is fully reliant on AI bots to do their recruitment, you know, make yourself, I guess, more attractive to that bot by using those keywords and using those stats and using those numbers that they are going to be looking for. But that's what you see a lot, is that they are using those bots to actually recruit, and it does make it hard for you to to get a call back, to receive that that feedback on what's going on. So for me, I would just say to the company that's doing the recruiting, again, this is a tool in our tool belt. Like, we should not 100% depend on an AI tool to pull it back. Because even when you pull back those resumes that they are recommending, you still don't know who you're getting. You still somebody could just be really good at getting
Resume
through the
writing.
chat bot. So
Yeah.
so they
Well, I
have to
use
be
AI
careful.
to write my resume, and so if I write it, if I use AI and I say, "Here's the job description, now create a resume for me," it doesn't mean that I actually have those skills.
Right.
It could be
Point,
that I'm
Linda.
just using. So it goes both ways on that side of it, which is why it's really critical, to your point, Ty, that you've got to be checking that
Yes.
stuff. Like, you can't just solely rely on the technology.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think with the onboarding side, onboarding is really great with AI tools because you have those checklists. I don't have to do so much manually to make sure that your diplomas are in place, and
Yeah.
your certifications and things like that. I'm able to go and run that background check, and when that comes back clean, then we're able to get you started. So I think for me, when it comes to onboarding, AI really helps a lot. Technology really helps to make that smooth, even if it's not AI that you're using, even if it's just a work force management tool, and you're able to go through that workflow. It makes it that much more powerful.
When both of you are working with organizations, one of the things, and I see this a lot of times, well, we definitely see this in the public sector. Cyndi, I don't know if you remember when they were looking at the recruiting processes in the city of Denver, and remember they put up that butcher paper. They wrote everything on, and it literally wrapped that conference room, I think, twice in the amount of processes that it took in order to do recruiting, to get on, to just the recruiting process at the city and county of Denver back then. We see that a lot of times in the public sector, that there's a lot of bureauc- bureaucracy around rules that have been in place for a really, really long time that maybe don't make sense anymore. So, can you talk a little bit about, especially we're seeing a lot of public sector organizations looking to buy new technology, but the piece that I think often is forgotten about is what we just discussed here, is that what are the processes that you're looking at and
Yeah.
how can you change them? Because otherwise, you're just going to replicate a really terrible process into the technology. And you probably won't even be able to replicate it entirely in the technology. So you're still going to have a ton of manual processes that you're doing just so you can check the boxes on these old archaic ways of doing things. So.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it goes also beyond public sector. I would say,
100%. Yes.
so I work with healthcare, I work with manufacturing and retail. And what I would say is, here's another great opportunity for AI. Let's, feed the AI information about, here's the processes that we're using, maybe sort of, segment it down so that you can, kind of take it piece by piece. And then just say, what are some improvements? Where are some efficiencies that we can build into the process? And Ty, I liked how you talked about onboarding, because, Ebony also talked about onboarding. And I do think that's a great opportunity for AI, because it also improves the employee experience. If I come in and nobody is paying attention to me and I have to ask, can I have my email now? Can I have my laptop now, and I'm having to chase things down. Whereas with AI, back to the checklist that you mentioned, Ty, it can give me those things that's a process, right? So that's just one process that improves the employee experience. And there's so many others when it comes to all the employee life cycle.
Yeah.
And I would say, and I know this is an episode about technology, but I would take it one step back
Yeah.
to manual process of just learning what the current states
Yes.
are
Yeah, I like
when you're
that.
working with the client. But and then we can use AI, like you said, Cyndi, to actually say, okay, here's the process. Can you help us to discover some inefficiencies and help us to make it more efficient? But I still like to do
Yeah, that first
the
step.
conference room and do the sticky
Mhm.
notes, like, because it also builds that team rapport as well.
Yes.
And I love a good team building exercise. So, and
Yeah.
then using your AI tools on the back end once you've discovered what they're actually doing.
One more thing to add to that. I'm so sorry. And this is something that I heard last night as well. This conversation last night was great. But anyway, AWS, they have a way that they do what you're describing, Tai, but they sort of say, okay, Linda, you're going to say, what is a day in the life of Cyndi, who is a frontline employee? Cyndi, you're
Mm.
going to say, what is a day in the life of Linda, who's a manager? And so back to what you were just saying, Tai, it kind of builds that empathy
Yes.
because it's like, oh, wow, I'm going to walk a mile in that person's shoes. And also, what are the gaps that maybe I wasn't even aware of? You know, from Linda's perspective, Cyndi is a frontline person. I had no idea she was doing these 27 other things
Yeah.
are not efficient. So sorry, just wanted to throw that in there because I thought that was a really cool way of doing what you were talking about.
Yeah,
Tai.
that's good stuff. I love it.
And even to your point, Ty, and I know Cyndi and I did this, and that back then I didn't even know what it was called, but I think it's called Kaiban, right? It's Kaiban or Kaiban, where you use the sticky notes, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Come
you know, I just called it the sticky note process. So,
on.
but
Me
I think,
too.
yeah, exactly. But I think, to kind of what we were talking about is being able to understand those processes before you start with the technology. So, and I
Yes.
do agree with you, Ty, if you, and this is so important, is you've got to actually walk through each of those steps because you have to understand, is there a reason for that step? Because there might not be, right? And so
Right.
it's kind of like as you start, or there might be, and then you eliminate that step, you deploy the technology, and you're like, oops, and you have a
Listen,
big mess, right? So now you got to try to fix that. And so really kind of going through that. But so often when we see organizations getting prepared to revamp their technology or to get new technology, they seem to bypass this whole thing that we're talking about here. And then we get into projects, and our whole focus from the implementer is just configuring, right? We got to get it configured, we got to get it tested, and we got to get it stood up. But we've not thought about the processes. We've not thought about all of any of those other things. So
lift
can you
and
maybe,
shift, right, Linda?
yeah, exactly. No, 100%. You're just taking bad processes and moving them forward. So can you talk a little bit, Ty, about how, like, what your recommendation is, and maybe even how you've approached those big projects where you're coming in and doing those massive technology shifts?
I get in trouble a lot, Linda.
We like that about you, Tai.
Oh, we do. That's right.
I try not to
Trailblazer.
wear the renegade hat, but I am such, because I think someone just said it. It's about walking a mile in your end user shoes, right?
That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ever since that very first implementation, like, I realized that was so very important to understand what they are doing and how they are feeling throughout this change.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I will back things up. If I come into a project, let's halt, let's back it up, and let's really find out what is going on. How are they using this system? No, we don't want to replicate everything that they're doing. I understand that this is a system, well, a solution, right? We want to put
Yeah.
in a solution, not a system.
That's right.
But we have to understand what they're doing before we can do anything else. Like
Yeah.
lift and shift, garbage in, garbage out. It's
Mhm.
the same thing. And now you spent $5 million and you're not realizing any ROI, any
Mhm.
efficiencies. And then that goes back up to that organizational alignment. So we're not in
Right.
alignment with what our organization wants to do and the money that they want to, bring back to the city or to the state, whoever you're working for. So I think it's very important that sometimes you kind of take a pause,
Mm-hmm.
especially if things are not going well, and find out where the gap is, and then, hey, let's find out what's going on in the current state and how we can better do it in our new solution.
Call that
Yeah.
slowing down to speed up.
Yes,
Yeah.
there you
No,
go. I love it.
exactly. No, I totally agree.
At the Delta Principle, we are transforming the way you experience change. Have you ever experienced an organizational change where your employees pushed back because it was too much, too fast, or they just didn't understand why they couldn't do things the way they've always done them? What about where communication was non-existent or unorganized, with important updates getting lost in the shuffle, leaving people confused? And have you ever experienced change where morale was at an all-time low because the change felt overwhelming and not aligned with your organization's culture? If you are being asked to lead an important organizational change, especially if you're new to leading change, or if you're just feeling overwhelmed, the Delta Principle is here to support you. We work closely with you as a trusted partner, co-creating real-world solutions to address your unique challenges, and we equip you and your organization for future success. Are you gearing up for your next transformation journey or exploring ways to strengthen your change management skills? Then let's connect. This year, we're thrilled to introduce Leading Change, a training designed for leaders driving organizational initiatives, and Navigating Change, a training tailored to empower teams and adapting to change with confidence. Our coaching and training sessions are fully customizable to meet your organization's unique needs. Reach out today to see how we can partner with you to make your next change a success. You can find us on LinkedIn or by emailing us at info@thedeltaprinciple.com.
Well, and I think, to our, we're trying to, obviously, we want to talk about all of the fun technology advancements and we want to, embrace all of this. But at the heart of it all, it still goes back to fundamentals, right? You've got to start at the beginning and really understand what business challenges are you trying to solve?
Right.
What are you currently doing and why are you doing it that way? And then what do you want the future to look like? So a lot of times, we see organizations will come in and they talk about, we can create a lower total cost of ownership, or you're going to get this massive ROI by implementing our technology. And most of the time, that's not true, but not because it's not capable of doing it, but because if you don't establish what the baseline measurement is at the beginning of that project, right, to say, this is what success looks like, and this is how we're going to achieve it, come up with those 3 to 5 KPIs, right? And then be able to say and don't look at year one. Year one is too soon, right? So start looking at years 2 and 3 to measure to see, did we actually achieve what we intended to achieve? Because that's the problem. Even today, we keep evolving technology and we keep thinking that's going to fix the problem. But really, the problem isn't in the technology. The problem is in the human process that is getting skipped before we actually put the technology in place, right?
And involving people in the conversation.
Involving people
Yeah.
in the conversation. So true,
Absolutely.
Cyndi. You see that frequently in big companies or in cities and counties and state government because, they're looking at it from up here and they're not down here. So you don't understand how the police department is operating and what they're, what's going on there. You don't understand what some of the challenges are on the front line in manufacturing while they're on the line there. You don't know because you're not bothering to go and ask the questions and understand the processes. And so then you're putting out a technology and then you're surprised when people are frustrated or it's not achieving the results that you intended. So,
Definitely. So
Mhm.
I cringe every time I'm in a meeting and someone brings up an issue, um, and then it's glossed over by the vendor, or they don't have someone in the room who has the ability to address the concern. Like a
Yes.
SME or something like that, and they,
Yeah.
and then someone tries to gloss over it. Oh, we're not try to do the same thing in this system as we're doing right now. That's really irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
What needs to be addressed is number one, the concern, and then someone in that room who's doing the job right now, they need to be there. They need to be able to say, okay, yes, this is how we do it. We may, here's a way that we could think through how to do it better in this new solution. But those people need to be in the room. And I guess my question for you all, I'm going to throw a
Yeah,
question out here.
that's
Is
fair.
We've been throwing them at you. So
That's
yeah.
right.
When you see that, like what should you do so that you can, express yourself in the right way? What should you do, and why do vendors do that when we are implementing those systems?
Well, I'll go first, and I'd love to get Cindy's take on this as well. So, working for a software company, exactly to your point, I'm a little bit of a renegade myself in that I'm not willing to accept that we're just going to ignore what the customer is asking. I think what ends up happening is everything comes down to dollars and cents, right? We're just so intent on getting the project done and moving on to the next one. But what I always think about that is how much money are you going to lose? One, if you lose that customer because they're unhappy, right? Or secondarily, how much time are you going to spend after implementation trying to fix a problem or trying to, so let's stop to Cindy's point, slow down to speed up. Let's stop and understand what's going on. I do think, and I think it's great advice for software vendors and for implementers out there, is that it is important to pause for a moment and take the moment to listen to what they're saying and really hear. I'm a big proponent of get to the core issue, right? Because you can't fix anything if you don't know what actually is causing the problem. If you can get to the core, then you don't just slap a bandage on it and then it breaks later. But I think that it is, honestly, Ty, if I were just, breaking it down, I think it comes down to dollars and cents. Everybody's just in such a big hurry to get it done and move on that they're not stopping, or they're dismissive of, well, you're just stuck in the old way of doing things and you got to move forward. You got to change. You got to be willing to do this. And so that's kind of what I've seen in my experience. I don't do that, but I do think that that is the commonality. It's why I don't do sales or implementations, because I want to consult and support
Yes.
from that perspective. But I don't know, Cyndi, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, and I think kind of going back to HR as a partner, I really enjoy, especially when it's a digital transformation that's going to touch the lives of your employees. I do think HR needs a seat at the table, because I do feel like a lot of times they're the ones saying, oh, that's a really good point. And the person we need to talk to is not in the room at this time.
Yes.
Here's somebody we can at least start that conversation with. So I'm a big fan of parking lots. I know that sounds really simplistic, but just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy, right?
That's right.
Take a parking lot. Okay, we need to talk about this topic. HR, who should we talk to? Get that person's name down. And back to what you were saying, Linda, it's like we need to kind of uncover all of those things before we can move forward. The other thing that I think happens a lot, back to what you were saying, Linda, about leaders, we have to have various roles represented, right?
Yeah.
Because what's important to a leader, the financial, ROIs and things of that nature, of course, that's what they're focused on. But we also need middle management, right? The people who are listening to what the change is going to be, listening to what the feedback is from those frontline employees. They're a really important key role in the conversations, as well as some of those frontline SMEs.
Yes, I
subject
totally
matter
agree.
experts.
Yeah, no. And another thing that I would maybe recommend to our listeners out there who who maybe are implementers or software, in that world, but also for the customer base as well. Oftentimes what ends up happening is, and part of this is trust and relationship building, right? Which is kind of comes back to that human element, is that, we oftentimes we think, oh, well, you're only charging this much money because you want to take advantage, and sure, you should know, you've been doing it for 50 years, you should know how to do this sort of stuff. It's not about whether or not a vendor or an implementer knows how to configure a piece of technology. It's really understanding your business,
That's
your
right.
organization, and what you want to accomplish. Because what good does it do if we're all going to just be cookie cutter? Then yeah, we could just come up with this package and we'll just dump it into your organization, and then you
Yeah.
figure out how you're going to make it work within there. Because if everybody operates the same, then I guess we could just take that approach. So I do think it's kind of on both sides as well, is making sure that you're not, as you're building out your statements of work, as you're thinking about your HR technology, really kind of take the time to identify what we were chatting about. What does success look like? What's important to me? And how are we going to do conflict resolution? Ty, I'm sure you deal with
Yes.
this all the time, and Cyndi as well, when you're leading projects and thinking about what does happen when we get to that place where it's a little bit of an impasse. How do we resolve that so we can talk through it? Because most of the time, if you just talk, it doesn't really take that much extra time,
Right.
and it shaves a bunch of time off the back end when you've done it wrong. So
Pay now or pay later.
that's
That's
right. That's
right.
right.
That's going to
Yes.
happen.
Eventually,
I
I
you
love
are
your
going to pay
sayings.
for it. Yeah.
Hi, what
I
do you
do.
think
I always
about
call my
that?
Cindyisms for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. But I think you are exactly right. That we have to take the time. We have to make sure the right people are in the room.
Yes.
If we don't do it now and define, I love that, Linda. Going back to that RFP, going back to that SOW, making sure that we are staying within the scope. And again, everything with project management, program management, portfolio management, right? It's all about what the organization wants to achieve. And I think a lot of people get away from that
I
during
agree.
projects, right? Because it gets to be so much. But there has to be like a governance
Hmm.
Yes.
team that comes back and kind of recalibrates. What are we really working towards, and are we meeting those goals? So I
Yeah.
think it's so important that throughout the project, that they come back and recalibrate, and that there are phase gates to say, okay, we've
Yeah.
met, these deliverables or these milestones, and we're able to move on to actual implementation or testing and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's
That
so important. Yeah, it's funny because as much as we evolve, we kind of go backwards sometimes, because in
Yes.
our intentions to be faster, and in a sense, we're trying to be more efficient, we're cutting out some really important processes that then help us to truly embrace the technology, right? So it doesn't matter how advanced technology gets. If we're not taking the time on the front end, then you're never going to really get to fully take advantage. I
really.
use the example of when, after with Teams and coming out and Zoom. Teams is like a remarkable virtual tool. It has some really great things in it. Most people don't know how to use any of it. They know how to make a phone call and have a Teams meeting, right? But you can whiteboard, you can do all of this stuff in that, but nobody ever takes the time for us to identify. So, like, if we're going to roll out a tool like a Teams or a Zoom or one of those other video chats in order to create collaboration in remote environments or hybrid environments, well, then we should really be able to embrace the tools, right? The
Um,
problem is again, we don't take the time on the front end to determine, why are we deploying the technology? What do we hope to get out of it? And then what type of training do we need to offer up? And maybe then you also identify, like, who is a SME in each department who
that's
gets to be
right.
your super user.
Champion.
Yeah, so that they can teach, because it's not like we always say, it's not HR's job to do everything, but they do need to establish the programs and the protocols to have in place to help with successful implementations of those types of technologies even. So,
Really good point.
yeah, no, I'm so well. So as I'm talking about remote and hybrid, I'm kind of curious a little bit. So I did a search this morning to find out how many employers in 2025 are requiring people back in the office. And it was a little interesting because it says that A recent survey by Resume Builder indicates that 90% of companies plan to have employees return to the office by 2025. However, research from Stanford and the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta revealed that only 12% of executives with hybrid or fully remote workers intend to implement return to office in mandates. And then in the United States, it said as of early 2025, 32% of firms require full-time employee or full-time in-office attendance for corporate employees. And then additionally, 70% of employers plan to enforce stricter return to office mandates by 2025, despite potential resistance from employees. So I bring that up because I'm curious, again, as we're thinking about technology and how it's going to help, a lot of the reason why we started to see a big trend towards moving towards more advanced HR technology was because of the hybrid remote environment that caused HR departments to have to think about how to do business differently, right? Now, if we're going to start thinking about trying to force people back into the office, and I know force is probably not the right word to use, but I'm going to use it, force employees back into the office. I'm curious, like, do we think that that's going to set back all of the advancements in technology from an HR perspective? Like, will we start to see a slowdown because we're like, everybody's coming back into the office, so I guess we can go back to business as usual. So I'm kind of curious on both of your thoughts around that. Ty, we'll start with you.
Oh, that's a really good question. Were great statistics. And I want to know more on the federal side, what that looks like. I know they're
Yes.
100% going back in to
Yes.
their offices as well. But I would say if managers or supervisors are going to make people or force people to go back into the office, I would think that it would be more in a hybrid type manner where, I can do 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. So to me, I see that the technology probably is going to continue to grow and stay the same, or trend towards going up, because I don't think that they are going to be able to get the right people in their seats if they are forcing people to be in an office 100%. People have become very used to not having to commute, having that flexibility with their children and their families, and they'll go and look for the right position. And
Yeah.
if that's not the right position and you want me to be in the office every day, I'll go somewhere else. I'll take my talent to South Beach, as LeBron James said back in the day. I'll take my talent somewhere else.
There you go. There you go. That's true. Cyndi, what are your thoughts, especially from a change management? Because we did kind of see this back in 2007 during the Great Recession, where we saw a big insurgence of HR technology because the only way to do more with less is with technology. So we started to see that. But as soon as the recession or the economy rebounded, we saw everybody kind of slip back into old patterns. And so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are from a change perspective as well.
Yeah, I don't see us dialing it back, honestly. Maybe we use technology in different ways, right?
Yeah, okay.
So
Yeah.
we're all together now, so we get to be face to face, but I don't see Chat GPT going away. I don't see, you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
I think it's just a different flavor of how we're using the technology. The other thing that I would say is it also depends on your what kind of industry are you in. So if
Right.
I'm in a global company, I'm
Good
still going to
point.
need Zoom. I'm still
Yeah.
going to need Teams. Even if I'm sitting next to Ty and Linda, I might just get on a chat, right, in Teams and throw a question out to our chat group. So
Mhm.
I don't see it going away. I still see a lot of this technology. And you're right, during the pandemic, when everybody was working from home,
Mhm.
we saw such a bump and an increase, and that's great. I think people are used to it now. And
Yeah.
so I still think that there's going to be a need for it as we move forward.
It's so fascinating, really, when you think about it, all the things that we get to talk about, and you think about the ebbs and flows and the changes, and as much as things change, they remain the same. Because even with all of the things that we're talking about, these have been a constant from many, many years ago, right? I mean, like if you think about the growth and where we are and what we're doing, none of this is new. It's all been going on for a long time. It's just like we say, the only constant is change, right? But the reality of it is these exact same scenarios have presented themselves over and over. Tai, you were talking about graduating in 2000. Cyndi and I graduated back in the 80s. It's like you watch I meant in 2025. We just graduated from high school. So, but you think about how much it has, but honestly, how much of it has really stayed the same at its core. If you look at the foundation, all these things we've been talking about, change management, business processes, KPIs, good project management, really that is the core of the success, regardless of where the technology goes and
Right.
how things transition. So,
Engaging with people and tapping into your
yeah.
HR teams as well. And yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So important. Well, Tai, what are your final thoughts for our listeners on this one? Like any key takeaways that you'd like to leave everyone with, or maybe some, best practices? So,
Yeah, I think key takeaways definitely embrace change, right? We cannot get away from change. It's nothing that we can do about it. The weather changes constantly, right?
right.
So we have to embrace those changes, but make sure that you are staying knowledgeable, right, of the changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And make sure that you're participating in the change. If something is happening within your organization, participate in the change. Ask, can you have a seat at the table? If not a seat at the table, sit along the back wall and just listen.
Yeah.
Just make sure that you are actively learning and growing and being open to change. That's what I would say.
Love that. Love that. Cyndi, any final thoughts? I know I don't usually ask you for final thoughts, but this one's a good episode. What are your final thoughts?
I could sit and have this conversation with you two ladies all day. I do think that change is not episodic. It is,
Yeah.
it's no longer project based. Back to what you were both saying, it's constant. So I think if we think about our HR, community and our HR business partners and leaders, whatever we can do to support the competency around leading change, navigating change, for our groups and for you as HR, folks
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
I think it just helps people through the constant change.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think those are really great reminders, great takeaways. As always, I love seeing both of you, and we
Too.
can't wait to be back next month with our next episode with Tai and her PM. And Tai, I just want to leave everyone too. You've got an exciting initiative that you have going on right now. So before we close out, tell everybody a little bit about this new program that you've launched.
Yes, thank you, Linda, for just always giving me the opportunity to shine and things like that. I totally appreciate it. But we have the Impact Collective. It's through Ask Academy, and it's, as Linda mentioned, Ask means always seek knowledge. We have to always stay learning, right? So really my goal with the Impact Collective is to transform project managers into project leaders. So it's through mentorship, it's through thought-based curriculum, blending again and bridging the gap between project management theory and then the actual application of it. So that is what we're doing. We're building next generation project leaders.
I love it. And how can people reach out to you too? We'll put this in the show notes as well, but how can people reach out?
So my website is herpm.com, HERPM.com. And then they can always email me at info@herpm.com if they would like more information about the Impact Collective.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tai. Well, as always, great to see you both. And to our audience, we hope you enjoyed the episode as much as we did. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the HR Her Resources podcast. We're so happy to have you with us on this journey. Music and production by Logan Misigatis of LJM Productions. We'd also like to thank our intern, Lauren Banas, for creating our logo and supporting our social media postings. If you'd like to connect with Logan or Lauren,
You can find their information in the show notes. If you found value in our discussion and think someone else might as well, please follow, subscribe to our LinkedIn, and share with a friend. Until our next episode, please take care and continue to support one another.